Hello and welcome back to the World Leader Leaderboard, the podcast where we rank every world leader in the world to tell you who's doing well and who's doing badly. This week I'm joined by Rory,
Hello.
Zach,
Hello.
and Ben.
Hello.
How are you all doing?
Excellent.
We're all doing well, no one doing badly?
Getting close to Christmas.
We are. Only one more episode this year after this one.
Is that how you measure how close we are to Christmas?
We've only been doing this for 3 weeks, but it is already how I base all time measurements around.
yeah. In January, it's only 52 more episodes till the next Christmas.
Wait.
When people ask me how old my baby is,
Yeah.
she's like 95 world leaderboards.
Yeah.
And 3 episodes of the editorial. This week we'll be running through 3 more people who are going to be added to our leaderboard who are winners of the week, as well as 3 more losers of the week, which will shake up and add to this board, which you can see on screen now, to work out who are the best and worst politicians in the world right now. We'll also be discussing your suggestion of who you wanted added to the leaderboard later in the show. But as always, let's start with the winners of the week and add some people to the board. Okay, Rory, let's start with you down the end.
Yes.
Who is your winner of the week?
So I have a new face for the board. My winner of the week is the European Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen. I think she must have been on our last board back in the day.
Previous
so
iteration.
she's returning to the board on the upside for now. The main headline reason for this is because she, in the last week, clinched this deal with Mercosur, which is the big South American trade bloc, a trade agreement between the EU and Mercosur, which is one of the biggest in the world, or will be one of the biggest in the world. It's still got a way to go. But she finally got that signed. 25 years in the making, that deal has been, which is as long as I've been alive, which is kind of wild. So yeah, that's remarkable that it's taken that long. So that's quite a quick win for her. She's recently re-elected as the European Commission President. So yeah, she's notched that victory. I also think, just more of a general point, she's a winner at the moment because of something we've talked about a lot, which is this leadership vacuum in Europe. Macron is in political turmoil in France. Scholz is probably on his way out in Germany. I think she is in a prime position to fill that void and really use the strength of the European Commission sort of to pursue her policies. And I think this deal is a good example of that. So yeah, I think she's doing well. I also think on the leadership vacuum thing, if we expect Scholz to lose the next election in Germany and Friedrich Merz to win, that will be a centre-right German leader, also from von der Leyen's own party. She's also German, so that will be a good relationship for her to have.
What do we make of this? Von der Leyen?
That is all very true. What slightly annoys me is, as you were speaking, I was thinking of cool things to add to this. And literally, as I wrote down, in many ways, leadership vacuum, and then successive CDU and next election.
Strike it.
I'm suspicious that you were reading off my notes.
We can check the tapes.
Check his eyeballs, where's he looking?
No, I completely agree with all of that. I think I have sort of, the one caveat I would put in is I think that her sort of future power depends on whether or not more or less power gets devolved to Brussels in the coming years. Essentially, whether or not sort of like the various crises facing Europe mean that we end up with a sort of more centralized EU with more central power, so more agency, or whether that sort of like wave of Euroscepticism that you see sweeping Europe at the moment manifests itself as less power to Europe. Whichever way that trend goes, I think will determine how much power she essentially has. The other thing I want to ask Rory is that she got Mercosur signed, but it now needs ratification.
That's the sort of, I mean, it feels silly to say the 25-year bit's the easy bit, but it's pretty difficult now. The question is, can France and other countries that oppose it build what's called a blocking minority, which I think it needs at least 4 countries representing at least, I think it's 35% of the EU population to vote against it, to block it. It's unsure if they'll be able to do that, but yeah, so there's still a long way to go for it.
Do you mind telling us a bit more about this deal, about what it would involve, why it's important, and why those countries are keen to block it?
Effectively, it's a trade deal between these 2 blocs that would reduce or get rid of tariffs on more than 90% of goods that go back and forth. So there's lots of raw materials coming out of South America that Europe wants. There's lots of sort of manufactured goods from Europe that South America wants. But the main sticking point, the thing that has got everyone up in arms, a lot of French people up in arms, is the agricultural goods that come from like Brazil, Argentina, these massive countries with really competitive like beef and poultry industries. And farmers in Europe are worried that those imports will sort of undermine them. The EU has tried to sort of counter those concerns by limiting the number of the amount of tariff-free like beef that can come in, but not enough. It hasn't been enough to sort of win over the farmers. So that's the main concern.
Okay.
Do you know who else might support the French, the Italians?
Italy is the main tipping point. So Poland opposes it. I think Austria does, the Netherlands, and I think Ireland does. But I don't think that's enough to get the population required. So it will come down to Italy probably.
Classic Maloney.
Yeah,
in the
so
middle
Maloney,
again.
she's very powerful.
We should
again.
put her up on the board too, just because she controls all the beef. Very interesting. We'll keep an eye on it next year. Well, over the next 25 years to see whether
see how it's going.
Ursula manages to get across the line. Because if she does, she can go up again, I reckon. Zach, who is your winner of the week?
My winner of the week is El Salvador's president, Nayib Bukele.
Wow.
Bukele. He's going up. He's basically going up because the price of Bitcoin is going up, and he's
A classic
a
combo.
big Bitcoin evangelist. So Bitcoin, I think earlier this morning actually peaked at $106,000 per Bitcoin after it was announced that Trump was appointing a very pro-crypto SEC chair to replace Gary Gensler. Bukele has always been a big Bitcoin evangelist. He passed the so-called Bitcoin law back in 2021. And he also spent not much, but a bit of El Salvador's sort of like state money buying up Bitcoins over the past like 3 years or so. And originally this was mocked. Obviously, it's just slightly unorthodox for a state to start buying up Bitcoins with its reserve currency or whatever. But it turns out that's sort of paid off. I mean, the actual sum of money involved is not that big. Like he probably profited, maybe like made, let's say like $100 million profit max, tens to $100 million. But it sort of adds to his image as like slightly prophetic and sort of like a savvy world leader. And there is, the most recent polling suggests his approval rating has gone up yet further to something like 85%.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a big approval rating.
Yeah, no, he is the most popular world leader in the world, probably. He reliably sort of polls at between 80 and 90% approval. And then obviously net approval then is sort of plus 70, plus 80.
What do we make of this? The most popular crypto bro in the world, maybe?
Are we going to start seeing other world leaders doing this now? Is this just the start of world leaders sort of buying crypto?
So you joke around, but Trump did talk about creating a Bitcoin strategic reserve, and it's a policy that's been pushed. I think there's actually a bill in the Senate at the moment. I can't remember what her name is, but there's a Republican senator who has basically said that the US should create Bitcoin strategic reserve, and it sounds like a crazy plan, and I think in lots of ways it is. But I think in a way, something that Trump might do and that he could probably get away with. I mean, the recent spike in Bitcoin has been essentially because it's been sort of brought into like normal finance, right? So like it was originally envisaged as like an alternative to the sort of orthodox finance, and it's now sort of been folded into it, and that has undermined its original like reason to be, but it has created a massive spike in the value of Bitcoin. And obviously if Trump created a strategic Bitcoin fund, which would involve buying up tens of billions worth of Bitcoins, I mean, that alone would push the value of Bitcoin up. But also the fact that it had been so sort of like aggressively endorsed or welcomed by the American state would also probably, if current trends are anything to go off, push the value of Bitcoin up anyway. So, he could really do the world's biggest pump and dump. He could buy tens of billions of Bitcoin, watch the price spike, and then just dump it all, and make the American taxpayer probably a few tens of billions of pounds, or dollars even. So, I mean, I don't think it is... I don't think other states will follow suit, but I think America is probably the one exception. And in a way, I think the odds are it will probably pay off for them.
That's mad.
There's countries as well, I mean, including this country, I think, where as they seize assets from criminals and various things, they've started to build reserves of sort of confiscated Bitcoin, and like
the Treasury, the US Treasury already has something like, I think it's like $200 million worth of Bitcoin just off stuff that it seized.
Crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. I think that the crazy story here is the fact that Bitcoin has been sort of like just folded. It's been like absorbed by normal finance. It was supposed to be like an alternative, and it just no longer could be that anymore.
Yeah.
So much of its value is tied up in the fact that it's been absorbed by normal.
And
finance.
no one's treating it like a currency anymore. It's just being treated like a asset. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. It's treated a bit like a reserve asset. and I think that maybe other states could buy it in small amounts as a sort of reserve asset. But I think the only other state that would consider buying a really significant amount would probably be the US under Trump. But I think that would be crazy if that did happen.
It would be.
Yeah.
Quickly before we move on, and quickly being the key word, we've obviously discussed the fact he's the world's
I'm
most...
not good at the quick.
I know you're not, that's why I had to emphasize it twice. We also talked about the fact that Bitcoin is the reason that he's being brought into this conversation today, but clearly it's not the only reason he's the most popular world leader.
Yeah.
Do you want to give us a couple bullet points for why else he's doing so well and he's so popular?
So I think there's basically two other reasons. I mean, the first is that he emerged as a sort of alternative to what had been, I mean, in many ways, it's quite a European setup, a two-party duopoly in El Salvador, and he sort of cut through the middle and emerged as sort of anti-establishment alternative. But the big reason is that he has successfully brought down El Salvador's murder rate and more generally its crime rate by pursuing an incredibly hard line approach to gangs where it's sort of the equivalent of declared a sort of national emergency, which meant that the state had a lot of powers to round up and detain people on not spurious grounds per se, but like without tons of evidence. Which is, El Salvador used to have, I think, one of the highest murder rates in the world and a really, really bad gang problem. And this policy sort of worked. He has detained or imprisoned thousands of people. I think as a percentage of the population, it's one of the highest in the world. And you might say, I mean, it's tempting to be sort of like dismissive and be like, well, unsurprisingly, that has brought down the murder rate. And that's a fair point. But it is worth saying that this was a really chronic problem for El Salvador, and it's a chronic problem for lots of South American countries. And he did actually solve it.
Yeah.
And so even if the method looks a bit sort of brutish and a bit sort of obvious, he did actually solve that problem. And not only has that made sort of El Salvador a safer place, and that's obviously translated into pretty high approval ratings, but it's also brought tourism back to El Salvador. And tourism is a really, really big source of, especially foreign currency, for smaller countries generally, but especially smaller South American countries. So yeah, that's been a bit of a win for him. And that in turn has given El Salvador a source of economic growth. So GDP growth has been pretty strong. I thought averaging about 3-4% past couple of years.
Yeah.
Pretty quick.
Very good.
Nice.
Very good. I was worried when we started getting into GDP figures that we were spinning, but very nice. Final person going up. Ben, who is your winner of the week?
So my winner for the week is Donald Trump. And to be quite honest, it's mad we've got to this point and he's not on the board already. I don't know if either of you noticed this, but he did actually win an election this year.
Yeah.
Quite spectacularly. So that on its own should be reason for him to be up on the board. But not only that, in the last week, we've actually seen more of the sort of mainstream start to accept him and start to, I mean, for want of a better phrase, start to butter him up. So we've had Meta, Amazon, and Sam Altman from OpenAI all provide Trump with 7-figure donations for his inauguration, and many have also gone to Mar-a-Lago to have meetings with him. So that on its own it shows that you've got sort of the tech industry all trying to win his favour and sort of accept that he is the president, that they're going to need to try and get him on side. But in addition to all of that as well, he's also actually won a case last week against ABC News, who falsely claimed he was found liable for rape, and they for various reasons the phrase they used was technically incorrect. So he's got a $15 million settlement from them, which is going towards his presidential library apparently. So all in all, last week, it's a lot of money that's been going towards him. But you've also seen, as a part of this, the mainstream media start to sort of accept him.
Nice, interesting. Trump obviously needs to be on the board at some point. Do we agree he's a winner, presumably? What do we make of this?
You want to go first?
Yeah, I think those are good assessments. I mean, this isn't a sort of side point, but the inaugural funds thing is kind of wild.
Yeah.
That there is just a pot that companies can put, or people or companies can put an unlimited amount of money in to pay for, the inauguration. But really, it's about like backroom access and being on good terms. Like, it's pretty sort of transparent. But, so I find that
so
pretty,
American.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, Ben's just done a video on campaign finance.
Yeah.
It's the sort of thing you cannot imagine even happening in the UK, let alone that much money being poured into it in the UK. We could probably get a seat at whatever thing it was of, Starmer. You'd probably have to donate like £1,000 and you'd probably get like a seat next to Starmer. Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. And I think there's some other reasons to think that Trump is a winner. I mean, you mentioned ABC News. They have just done some polling, or maybe they've just published some polling suggesting that Trump's approval rating is an all-time high because people approve of the way he's handling the transition. I don't even really know what that means. You know what I mean? I think the main thing he's like doing is sort of spatting with people like Trudeau and you know doing funny tweets and stuff, but that's working apparently.
But the thing is as well that it's quite interesting looking at this from the UK's perspective as well, because we're in this weird period where Biden is still nominally the president, but Trump is obviously incoming.
Yeah.
So you've got Biden doing one thing and Trump saying another. And to the rest of the world, it's like, Biden is nominally in charge, but like, who is actually in charge? You have these meetings taking place like Notre Dame between Trump and others to try and sort of win him over, try and get him on side on policy issues. But he's not even in yet. I mean, this is this weird period where you've got sort of two different figures, both nominally leading the US. And in other countries, you have that's not the case. It's like in here, one person wins an election, it's the same day.
Time to shake a tip jar and ask Meta for some money.
That's it, isn't it? Yeah. It's just so strange. I mean, in terms of calling the shots, but it's terms, if you're trying to achieve a policy aim, you're not going to be trying to win Biden over, are you?
Oh no, I think exactly saying the opposite.
I'm saying Biden can't do anything substantial. I don't think he even has like the political space to do anything substantial. So it's only like formally a bit weird in that like it looks a bit weird to invite Trump. Macron's going to put something odd on the invite. Not president, but please president-elect.
You say that, but Trump's been quite clear on foreign policy aims, and yet Biden's been arming Ukraine more. Like that's like.
So I think that is one case. I think that is interesting. But I think I would say, I don't want to go into this too much detail, I don't actually think that's too inconsistent with Trump's policy. I think Trump's policy would actually be to continue arming Ukraine for a bit. And then I do think there are signs.
So you don't think he's going to solve the crisis on day one like he previously?
No, but I think if he doesn't solve the crisis on day one, I think there are signs that his response will be to escalate support to Ukraine. So I don't think there's actually that much tension there. But I think this speaks to another thing, by the way, which is that I think the other reason that I think Trump, I think things looking really great for him at the moment, is that all of his foreign policy goals, they're sort of the circumstances sort of aligning with them, right? So Ukraine is a good one. So Ukraine, I think even 6 months ago, we'd been skeptical about the idea that Trump could do some sort of deal. But I think there are pressures both inside Ukraine and inside Russia, where the economy really is overheating, that do actually make a deal more likely. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but more likely. I think his hardline stance on China, the Chinese economy is still struggling at the moment, and they've just sort of come into a whole lot of stimulus packages that haven't done anything. I think that sets Trump really well for his coming trade war with China. Basically, the trade war is sort of who blinks first. You do damage to each other's economy by cutting one another off, and it's who can sort of like survive the pain for longest. And I think that given the American economy does look pretty strong at the moment, whereas the Chinese doesn't, at least in relative terms, I think that sets him up pretty well for that. Iran, he wanted to go maximum pressure sanctions on Iran, and I think before, the reason people were skeptical of that policy, and some people argued instead for the nuclear deal, is because they thought, what's the point in maximum pressure sanctions on Iran? You're not going to get regime change. They're not going to back down. But I think Iran is in such a state at the moment, both economically and strategically, for what it's worth. They're having just lost their main ally in Assad, and then having Hezbollah and Hamas essentially decapitated. I think that you probably could squeeze some concessions out of Iran with maximum pressure sanctions. I don't think that's a crazy policy. And so I think on the foreign policy front, I think Trump just does seem really well placed. The last thing I'll say that I think Trump seems well placed for is he spent a lot of his campaign talking about energy prices and inflation more generally. And I think there are lots of reasons to think that inflation will actually fall in 2025. And not for anything Trump's done. And I mean, the main reason that the World Bank and the IEA think that oil prices especially are going to fall is weak Chinese demand, and the basically voluntary cuts to production by OPEC Plus members. Those are going to be rolled back basically beginning in April next year. And that combination of high supply and chronically weak demand will mean lower prices. And that's something that they'll be not necessarily great for the American economy. It interacts in sort of weird ways with the American economy as a whole, but it'll be great for Trump's political prospects because that will mean lower gas prices, which American voters really, really care about. And it will also probably mean lower food prices because there is a very, very strong correlation between energy prices and food prices. And so, unless Trump offsets that sort of deflationary effect with tariffs, which can be inflationary or some other weird policy, he'll get to take credit for it. And that means that given that the American economy is already growing at a pretty good rate, he'll get both strong GDP growth and low inflation or lower inflation. all else being equal again, and saying nothing about whatever Trump's sort of the effect of his weirder economic policies. And so I think Trump, everything, the stars were aligning for him. I really do think.
Sounds like a good video.
Yeah, I mean, it could well be.
2025 is going to be a great year for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
The year, well, it's going to be the year of Trump anyway,
Yeah,
probably. But
It always was. Yeah.
before we move on, Trump isn't the only one shaking the tip jar. We also have something to sell. If you didn't know already, we're selling a magazine called Too Long.
Are we?
We make it every 4 months, and this is our latest issue. It's the election special, and it runs through all of the major elections that happened in the last year. Now, you probably know this already because we've talked about it a whole bunch before, but we're going to run down the line, and I want you each to give one reason why people should consider picking up a copy if they haven't already. My reason is Christmas is coming up. If you're in the UK, it will still likely be delivered before Christmas, so it's a good gift for yourself or a TLDR fan. Or you can buy a digital edition and just email it to them if you don't love them that much. Ben, why should someone pick up a copy?
It has an excellent crossword.
Oh, we've not even mentioned the crossword.
True,
It does have a crossword, a very nice crossword.
Very nice crossword. You know, when people are getting annoying on Christmas Day
That's
afternoon,
true.
you need something to do, you know, on your own.
Crossword.
Do a little crossword.
Love it.
So on brand for you. Sitting alone at Christmas doing a crossword.
Just in the afternoon when there's sort of a lull after Christmas dinner.
Wow.
Zach, why should people buy it?
I think it's quite hard to sort of like mentally keep track of like the bajillion elections that have happened this year. And I think this does quite a good job of it. You'll feel like you have a better grasp on 2024 by the end of it.
Rory.
I think graphically it's lovely.
Ah.
Yeah. Even if you don't read it, you should definitely read it. It's a really nice thing to just
Just
look at.
glaze your eyes
Yeah.
over and skim.
Yeah.
Honestly.
And it'll look good on a shelf, look good on your coffee table
True.
to impress people. Yeah,
Makes you look smart.
it does.
Come on.
Maybe.
Come on, don't undermine the pitch.
I was going to say, genuinely though, on it looking really pretty, I have one at home, and Margot, my 9-month-old daughter, she loves just like sort of tearing through it. You know?
Physically?
Yeah,
Does she love the copy?
No, she does tear it a bit, but she just loves seeing like the colours and stuff.
It
so
is
it's great.
It's brightly coloured.
Yeah, she slaps at Trump. You know?
Well, if a 9-month-old hasn't convinced you, then I don't know how else we're going to do it.
Crossword.
The crossword. If you want to pick up a copy, you still can. We have a limited quantity left, besides the digital edition, which you have infinite quantity of. But the physical copies, we genuinely don't have that many of left. So if you do want a copy, then head over to toolong.news and use code 2podcast for £2 off. We really do
spell that?
appreciate it. It's on screen. If they can't work it out,
Fine. Then
just
they
pay
won't do well at
£2
the
more.
crossword.
Just pay
Yeah.
£2 more. Yeah, exactly. If you
Cryptic.
can't work that out, crossword's way beyond you. We really would appreciate the support. It's expensive to keep TLDR running, and it would be lovely as a gift.
Especially
to
when you're
us.
insulting their intelligence and
Exactly.
lowering our viewer base. But yes,
Okay, so every week we ask the audience to submit someone that they want to see added to the board or moved on the board, and we select the person in the top comment, and that is who we add. This week's top comment from the last episode was Canada's Justin Trudeau. Hey, Future Jack here. Just a quick note to say that this podcast was recorded around midday UK time on Monday the 16th of December. And since then, we've seen some more drama surrounding Trudeau, including his finance minister resigning and attacking his leadership. So keep in mind when watching this section, there's obviously some news that would have been worth mentioning here had it broken in time. And if you want to learn more about that, there's a full explainer over on the TLDR Global channel, which we'll link in the description. I'm going to run down the line as normal. Do you think he's a winner or a loser? And then we can discuss. Rory, winner or loser?
I think he's a loser. It sounds harsh, but he's one of many incumbent leaders whose polling is just really, really dire. I think Canada has an election next year, and by all sort of indications, his party, the Liberal Party, will lose and the Conservative Party will win because they're so far out ahead.
Yeah.
I think there was a poll, I looked it up this morning, I think there was a poll that showed Trudeau's party Trudeau's party level with the third place party, the NDP. So he's not just in a distant second place, he's sort of at risk of falling to third place. So it's pretty big loser for me.
Pretty loser.
Yeah.
And Canada do use a first past the post system, so it's really quite miserable.
Zach, you're presumably agreeing, loser?
Yeah, completely agree. I think maybe in another week you could have said like, oh, maybe his poll ratings have improved a bit from last week, even if he's still doing very badly in the aggregate. But that's not even true. The latest Angus Reid polling, and they do polling every month, has him at an all-time low.
Oh no.
Yeah, with a net approval rating of -40. I mean,
Bad.
it's Peter Fiala sort of levels.
Yeah.
A little bit of European
True
satire for the
TLDR
true
viewers
fans.
will
Yeah.
appreciate that reference.
So 68%. You like that one, did you?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. 68% disapproval, 28% approval in December.
That's crazy.
Absolutely miserable. I think, we mentioned that, it's in part this issue that all incumbents are having. He's been in power for a very, very long time now. But I think there are probably specific reasons in the Canadian context to make him quite as unpopular as he is. I think that housing has just been a recurring issue. And I think the problem with housing costs have gone up massively in Canada, especially in desirable cities. And the reason that's been so disastrous for him is not just because it sort of irritates voters who would already be annoyed with him, but it's also eaten into a support on the Canadian left, more sort of progressive left-leaning voters who might otherwise like him think that he's just done a bad job in the economy, a combination of low wages and very, very high house prices.
You going to break with tradition, or are we agreeing
I'm
he's a
putting
loser?
No. Also down. I think, to be fair, you both summarised that very well. I was just going to say, a few years ago, had very good vibes. I feel like his vibes have gone down. Probably as a part of the polling, but...
He did have great vibes. I feel like you don't get much great vibe Trudeau anymore.
Quite a few years ago. I don't know if he's had good vibes. I mean, it depends what you mean by good
pre-COVID
vibes.
probably.
Pre-COVID. I think there was a sense in Canada, you sort of glean this from reading the Canadian press, that there was a pre-COVID and a post-COVID Justin Trudeau. And I think COVID, there's a couple of things that happened. I mean, one, I do think that his politics shift to focusing more on cultural questions. And identity politics, that sort of thing. And I think there was some backlash against that. You see that in basically every developed country. But that's also when the housing crisis gets really, really bad, and immigration really ticks up. And I think that those two things have ended up being very, very controversial in the Canadian context. And the last thing, obviously, COVID means inflation.
Yeah.
And especially because wage growth has been quite weak. I think it's fair to say probably in part because of very high immigration numbers. I mean, there's a bit of academic debate over that, but there is a sense in Canada that very, very high levels of immigration have brought down wages for low-skilled workers. That means that inflationary crisis that hurts incumbents across the world really hurts Justin Trudeau.
Yeah.
I don't really know why he's running again. I think next year he'll be in office for 10 years.
Yeah.
And 10 years is Blair bowed out after 10 years. Merkel was longer than that, but it just feels like a natural point to step back, but he's still...
He could drop out last minute Biden did, maybe. It went so well.
I think it's too late, but apparently there are reports of people like Mark Carney, former governor of the Bank of England, who's now setting up sort of quiet challenges to sort of, to oust him before the election. I think it's probably too late. And I think it's one of the reasons why he's unpopular, by the way, is that there's this sense that he's very stubborn. And that he's, in the face of widespread opposition, he's just not changed either his tact or his strategy.
Interesting. He's not the only loser of the week, though. We got 3 more. So let's get into it. Rory, let's start with you again. Okay. Who is your loser of the week?
My loser of the week is Brazilian President Lula da Silva. This is going to sound like a mean one, but bear with me because I do have a broader explanation. So he recently, he just came out of hospital having had emergency brain surgery. Because he had a brain bleed linked to a fall he had in October where he hit his head. That's not the reason
That's
why.
That's not the reason he's going down?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's sort of just to set the scene. I think the reason I'm putting him down is that this is just part of the sort of general thing that has started to raise questions about his age and his health. He's 79 years old.
Yeah.
The next election is 2026, so he'll be more than 80 by that point. There's a really sort of strong Biden parallel you can draw here. He was a veteran politician who returned and sort of defeated this populist, hard right incumbent to much celebration, but is now sort of seeing his approval rating decline a little bit. I think, so this is just one story that's raised questions about his age and his health. He had to miss a few international trips because of it. And he's got a few years before the next election. He may well choose to say, okay, I'm not going to run again.
Yeah.
He may not. But the real issue is that his party, the Workers' Party, PT in Brazil, basically doesn't really have a plan for the post-Lula era. They don't have a plan B if he doesn't run. There's no one who really commands that level of sort of name recognition and popularity that he has, and I think that's a big danger for them.
Interesting. Interesting comparison too. Also, pretty rude you called it him having a fall rather than him falling over.
When you get to
Really
like
leaning
70 something,
into
you
his
have a
age.
fall.
Yeah, that's fair.
It's the double whammy of a brain bleed, and then you're down on the worldly leaderboard. It's a terrible week.
Let's hope he doesn't see it. He doesn't need that. What do we make of Lula being down? Is Rory just bullying someone fresh out of hospital, or is it valid?
I think we clearly,
Yeah.
I think there's clearly something to that. I would say, in Lula's defense, I think one of the things that's interesting about Lula, I don't know enough about the actual politics in Brazil, but the Brazilian economy has performed really quite well, driven by some quite strong government spending, and it's created a bit of an argument between Lula and his sort of central bank chief. But I think it's an interesting data point because it's one of those where basically running the economy quite hot. There's people obviously very anxious about inflation in the aftermath of the last couple of years, but it does seem that actually you can run economy. I mean, I don't know. You're going to tell me this is boring, but I do think that basically there was some tentative evidence from Brazil and elsewhere that perhaps politicians are too anxious about how hot they can run economies, and actually you can run an economy pretty hot with inflation sort of running at 3, 4, 5% without getting into sort of wage price spiral territory. And it does look like the Brazilian economy is growing really quite strongly at a time when basically the entire global economy is doing pretty badly. And so I think his economic management is broadly to be applauded, even if it has created some tension with the central bank.
Zach,
Yes.
who is your loser of the week?
Nice. No more about that. Let's go.
It was interesting. I'm conscious we're talking on time and I'll get told off by Scarlett.
Mine is Japan's Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba. And yet again, it's just inspired by approval rating numbers. There's different pollsters give different numbers, but basically the consensus is that over the past week or so, it's fallen by about 5%. This is in part because the Japanese Parliament is currently discussing sort of new changes to campaign finance laws in the wake of the LDP's slush fund scandal, which Rory will know more about. But it was the reason that Kishida, the last PM, had to step down. And obviously that's drawn attention back to that issue, which isn't a great look for the LDP. But it's also because he's struggling to manage his minority government. Obviously, that's pretty tough. He's in a minority government with the LDP and their smaller party, Komeito. But to get his legislation through, he's had to sort of negotiate with the main opposition. And that's forced him into some uncomfortable compromises.
Wow. Yeah. That was so under
Very
90
rapid.
seconds. Smashed it.
Nice.
I named this mainly at Rory because Rory is our Japan guy. What do you make of this?
Yeah, I think it's a fair one to put on. I think he's such an interesting guy because he has some really interesting views and ideas on things, especially defence and foreign policy. But he basically has no chance to actually pursue any of those because, like Zach said, he's got a minority government, so he has to deal with the opposition, but he also has to deal with this big right-wing faction in his own party that really doesn't like him. So he is just in a really difficult situation. And then sort of adding to the chaos is, he's going to have to deal with Trump coming in, and he's also now dealing with South Korea in political turmoil. That trilateral alliance is sort of looking a bit shaky, or not shaky, but uncertain.
Yeah.
Because of those reasons. So yeah, I think it's fair to put him down.
Yeah, I think the LDP is sort of stuck in a slight vicious circle here where there's sort of factional infighting. And that leads to lower poll numbers, but that just makes the factional infighting worse. And they've been stuck in this
familiar.
for a while, I know. Yeah.
There's a good piece about it. I was just
That was
thinking.
a very delayed plug.
In the magazine. It's even called Japan, A Return to Instability.
It's a
It
lovely
was
name.
very prescient,
Lovely
I've got to say, Rory. So congratulations.
I think we should cut that.
Finally, Ben, who is your loser of the week?
Yes, so this week I'm putting down Zach's good friend, the King. And that's because there's a few reasons. The main one is that Jamaica has introduced legislation to remove the King from their constitution. So that would
Actually, sorry, start that again.
No, it's all good.
I don't want to have me saying treason in here.
Why not?
Oh, because I think that looks pretty right-wing.
It's funny though. It's good for balance.
Okay, fine.
I'm allowed to keep the
You're
joke
allowed to
about...
have
Do you want to start again?
Keep going. No, keep going. You're good.
Okay. So yeah, Jamaica has introduced legislation to remove the King from the constitution. Previously, already 4 of the 12 former colonies in the Caribbean have transitioned to a republic, with the most recent being Barbados in 2021. So this would just make them the latest country to become a republic. Obviously, this is a trend that was always going to happen after the death of the Queen. A lot of people sort of held on because of her long tenure, and I suppose out of respect. And it just shows that this trend is continuing. But just to add to that last week, which was already sort of a pretty bad story for him, his brother, Prince Andrew, the court documents revealed, and it was all over the papers last week, that Prince Andrew maintained a close relationship with a Chinese spy that was banned in the UK. Which has presented Charles with another sort of publicity issue with Christmas coming up. Obviously,
What?
How is that relevant?
this is relevant because one of the big photo ops, I suppose, of the year for the royals is on Christmas Day,
Yeah.
and whether you're trying to show that you're maintaining a close relationship with Andrew, given all of his previous record, plus this new story, is going to be tricky for him.
It was quite a highbrow podcast a second ago. It's now like a Daily Mail style.
I think it's a relevant thing for. I mean, the King's position is very much tied to public opinion.
That is true.
Did Andrew know that this was a Chinese spy who was banned from the UK?
I think he was banned prior to the relationship being maintained.
No, it wasn't.
I thought it was. I thought we knew this.
No, I don't think there was a relationship being maintained, but he was not. The Chinese spy, the Chinese businessman, had relations with a whole load of other government officials beforehand, and then it came out that he was a Chinese spy. And I
But did Andrews?
I don't think the relationship was maintained after it was turned out it was a Chinese spy. We should double check this though.
Yeah. Should we double check this?
Let's double check this. While Ben's live fact checking, let's focus on the Jamaica part, because will he get a photo taken with Prince Andrew on Christmas Day? Arguably, he shouldn't regardless, but let's park that for the moment. This is the latest of a number of countries potentially moving away from the monarchy, as Zach said, as Ben said, especially following the death of the Queen. What do we think this means for the Commonwealth, the UK? Does it mean anything? Is it just a case of like, we don't want you on our money anymore, we want independence for, whatever reasons, and for the UK it doesn't matter much? Or is this actually a big deal beyond just the King wants to be liked?
I don't think it really does make any substantial difference.
Okay.
I mean, for two reasons. One, I think the main vehicle for royal soft power is the Commonwealth, and getting rid of the King as your head of state doesn't actually necessarily mean you leave the Commonwealth. Lots of countries now in the Commonwealth without the King as the head of state. And I also think the second reason is just that I think that sort of the royal soft power has held up remarkably well under Charles. I think if you cast your mind back to, when the Queen died, there was all that talk about, is this the beginning of the end for the royal family? No, they're still sticking out. They're very good politicians, and they've got a very good press secretary as well. So, I think they're doing pretty
Really
well.
not doing well to dispel the argument that you're quite good friends with the King.
I'm not good friends with the King. I've never met the King.
I don't believe that for a second.
Sounds like a hostage situation. No, I don't. But that's
The
my.
King sat in the corner.
He's going to the Christmas party.
As long as Andrew's not coming too.
Yeah, I don't think it really makes much of a difference either way.
Sure.
Rory?
For Jamaica, it's a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
I doubt King Charles is sort of, we're past the era where they would sort of fight openly to stop that happening. I think he's been quite open, saying like this is a decision for these countries, whether it's Jamaica or Australia or whoever. But yeah, I think it's a sign of sort of where things will go. I think,
In a way,
I don't think it's devastating. For
I think it's quite a good opportunity for him to show his good vibes. Do you know what I mean? The fact that he's not fighting back
so.
against
He's
it. He's being very accepting.
Yeah.
Very modern of him.
What's the situation?
Zach was right. It wasn't. It was found out, and then he did cease to keep.
We had a
Cold
lawsuit on
open
our
just
hands.
be. Zach was right.
Do you have any final words, or are we all good? You kind of got interrupted, and we handed over these two. Because...
Yeah, I would say that the fact that Jamaica is leaving, I think is more of a big deal than the other two are arguing. I think that it does. I agree that there was an argument after the Queen dying that there would be more countries leaving more quickly. But the fact that this is still rumbling on, and there are questions about Australia in the future and things like that, I think this sort of keeps that issue alive in the minds of many other countries that might want to become a republic. So yeah, I do think it's more of a big deal than you two think.
Well, let us know in the comments whether you agree with Ben that it is a big deal.
I think it's a big deal, but I don't think it's like devastating for the monarchy. I don't think it's the end of the monarchy.
Let us know what you think in the comments, regardless. And also let us know in the comments who you want us to add to the board in the next episode. I will say that because of Christmas, we will be recording the next episode within about 24 hours of this episode going up. So be quick with your voting. let us know. Comment who you want. Vote for other comments if you like them, because it's the highest voted comment, the top comment, within reason, will be added to the board in the Christmas special. You're not allowed to pick someone Christmassy, though, I don't feel.
Who's
Christmas vibes.
Santa.
If you want like the Prime Minister of like Iceland or Finland or something, I'll allow it, because like
or a
Christmas
world
vibes.
leader who looks the most like Santa?
Oh, that would be good. But before we close, as always, we're going to run down the panel and establish the biggest winner first. If there's consensus, we can move on. If not, we have to have a little discussion. But biggest winner. Your options are Ursula von der Leyen, Bekele, and Trump. Rory, who are you voting for as biggest winner of the week?
I think I'm going to put Trump in.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't need to explain why.
Yeah.
No, I've been sold on Trump as well.
Ben?
I think Trump. I think he should have been up earlier.
It's a clean sweep. Trump is our biggest winner of the week, and as such, moves up an additional spot. Okay, for loser of the week, you've got 4 options. You've got Trudeau, you've got Lula, you've got Ishaba, and you've got the King. Who do you want as the biggest loser of the week, Rory?
That's tricky. I think I would put Ishaba, maybe?
Okay. Zach?
Ishaba's a strong contender, but I think I would have gone for Trudeau. I think,
Yeah, he does have more general.
and I think Ishaba's but it's also specifically this week is fair with Ishaba. But I think actually Trudeau has also had a bad week, at least according to the most recent polling.
I'm convinced.
So I'd
say
probably
Trudeau.
go Trudeau.
Yeah.
Okay. Two Trudeaus.
I'm going Trudeau as well. I think the polling
triple
was the
Trudeau.
thing that sold me just how bad his polling is.
Triple Trudeau means that he drops another
Wow.
space on the board. 2 consensuses. I mean, Rory was a little late, but we'll allow
I
it.
didn't
We'll
put
allow
Fast
it.
and loose
five,
at the term
but-
consensus
Yeah, well-
there.
He didn't take much convincing. So, those are the results. And as always, if you want to see your Trudeau equivalent, your audience suggestion added to the board next week, then let us know in the comments who you think that person should be. Who should be added to the board, or who should be moved that's already on the board. The top comment will be the one that moves or is added within reason. So let us know. Also worth noting that because of Christmas, next episode will be recorded about 24 hours after this episode is posted. So you need to be really quick. And if you're not within that first 24 hours, I'm sorry, you probably missed it. But let us know who it should be, and join us next time for another episode of the World Leaderboard. Goodbye.
Goodbye.